This week's episode of You're Welcome with Michael Malice is brought to you by Farmer Bill's Provisions. Try their biltong. It's like beef jerky, but 10 times better. Folks, I want to talk to you about Farmer Bill's Provisions. It's a great product because they make something called biltong. What is biltong? It's basically beef jerky, but a lot better because beef jerky, which is a great way to get protein, is loaded with soy, high sodium, and sugar. Go look at the ingredients. You'll see what I'm talking about next time you're at the Buc-ee's or whatever. What biltong is it doesn't have any of that stuff to any large degree. So it tastes much more like meat than like candy. It's a great way to get protein. It's a great way to snack healthy. You don't feel gross afterwards, and you're not going to get that bloated stuff from all that sodium and soy that you don't need in your diet. And Farmer Bill's was very smart because they mailed me their product, and you better believe that within 2 days, it was all inhaled because it was so delicious. And if you're with your friends and they're asking, what do you have there? Is that jerky? You go, no, it's biltong. It's much, much better. So their flavors are original beef, spicy chili beef, original bison, and spicy chili bison. Why go for a protein bar full of carbs and sugar or processed stuff when you could have real meat that tastes like meat and is delicious? And they're fans of the show, and I'm a fan of their product, that's for sure. So grab Farmer Bill's biltong today. Go to farmerbillsprovisions.com. Use code MALICE for 15% off your order. That's farmerbillsprovisions.com. Use code MALICE for 15% off. And I'm telling you, it is delicious. And it's not easy having this underwear model build, but eating things like biltong instead of eating junk food is a great way to get lean and eat healthy and still treat yourself every once in a while. Grab some biltong today. Go to farmerbillsprovisions.com. Use code MALICE for 15% off your order. Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. Guys, we have with us our probably favorite guest, Dave Smith. He is host of Part of the Problem with Third Legion of Skanks. Do you have a second comedy special or is it just Libertas?
Libertas and then 30 minutes with Dave Smith.
Sure,
a half hour last year.
So I want to talk to you. You know, we always talk politics. You and I both had a lot of fun during COVID, just shooting the shit or whatever, keeping each other and the audience sane. And one of the reasons I got into the career I have is I remember being at home watching I Love the 80s and I Love the 90s, these shows on VH1, and they had these pundits just watching clips and riffing on them. And I thought to myself, I could do this. And I did, right? So that's like my job now. And I went to see a comedy show here recently, and I'm not going to say where it was. It wasn't Mothership, and it was really bad, like bad. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking like, okay, I could do this. Because for those who don't know, it's Talk About Ego and Hubris. Before I started being an author and internet twat, I did stand up for a few months, and I couldn't handle it because some of the jokes that kill one night bomb the next. And also it's just grueling, like working that whole circuit, blah, blah. I'm in a weird position now because I could probably sell out like a small club without anything. And at the same time, you know, is this something I want to get into? There's a lot I want to talk about, but I talked to you, Kurt Metzger, David Lucas, Dave Landau, and Andrew Heaton, all professional comics. And I'm like, do I have what it takes to get my foot in the door? And everyone encouraged me, which would be a great meta troll across 5 people. Like, oh yeah, you should definitely do this. So I want to.
I got off the phone with you and just texted Kurt, say yes. Malice is about to call you. Just say yes, dude. Encourage him.
It's happening. It's Von Falken. But and what was interesting is last week I gave a talk at Clemson, and I remembered, and I have so much to ask you about comedy. I remembered what it's like when you're on that stage and like something doesn't land, and it's you and a mic, nobody else, and that audience staring at you, and it doesn't matter that 10 seconds ago you got them to laugh. Like you just didn't land something, and it's very, very scary place. Now, I think it's a little different for you at this point because once you're headlining, they're coming there to see you. So it's really hard to kind of screw up unless you're totally off your game because they're rooting for you. But let's just walk through this because I think a lot of people are interested in this field, and you've put in your dues. You've been doing this for a very long time. When you're starting out and you're like some kid who thinks he's funny and he's doing these open mics, so on and so forth, like, what do you wish you would have told yourself back then?
Oh man, that's a good question. I don't really know. I'm not. I don't know what this is very bizarre, but I think I was just having this conversation with Lewis. Not particularly like pertaining to comedy, but just like if you could talk to your 15-year-old self, what would you tell yourself? And in a weird way, it's kind of like when you're actually thinking about your own life, you're like, it's not as if anything I could have said, like you can't like impart wisdom really like that. Like you kind of have to figure it out yourself. Like people ask me all the time, like when they're starting out stand up advice. And I always just say, like, dude, just dive into it. Like my only advice is like dive into it head first. Just start doing it because that's the only way you're going to start to figure out any type of path.
Wait, hold on. Let me interrupt because I maybe I'm asking the question wrong because I get asked advice a lot about being an author, right?
Right.
And the advice I have is don't look at good books. Look at terribly written books. Reverse engineer what they're doing wrong. Why do you hate this? And then once you figure that out, you'll be at a B. You'll be competent, which is really head and shoulders above other people. And I can rattle off the books. If you're trying to read or write a biography, autobiography, the biography of Dennis Thatcher by his daughter Carol is perfectly executed in its mistakes. Everything about that book is wrong. There's a book by F.A. Harper, who was like one of the early libertarians. He founded IHS. I forget what something called Liberty. Perfectly wrong. Terrible. If you're trying to do a comedy book, there's a book called Statements by Amy Bykowski. And again, it's not that these books aren't readable. You can read them, but every choice that they make is a mistake. And it's kind of amazing when you watch something that's wrong in every single aspect because it's really a good a learning device.
Oh, I mean, I completely agree with that. I mean, I think that watching I think both, like in comedy, at least for me, watching like amazing comedians was enormously helpful, but equally helpful was watching really terrible
Yeah.
comedians because it's the constant, it's the same dynamic. It's like you're learning from both of them. You're learning what to do and you're learning what not to do. And there's something that you can almost pick up on. Like, I think very similar to what you're saying. When you see someone who's really bad at stand-up comedy, like you can learn, you're like, what is it that makes this person so bad?
Yeah,
And
so
you can
what is it?
kind of learn to,
When you see someone get on stage, what are the cues that right away you're like, okay, this person sucks?
um, there's like, there's kind of like an inauthentic thing that a
Yeah,
lot of people do. It's like they're worried about not being a certain type of person that they think they're supposed to be. So they
yeah.
kind of like take on something that just isn't them. And, not, we're talking about comedy. I promise not to make this more about politics, but it's like the same advantage that Trump had over every politician was that everybody else suffers from this thing where they're trying to be like a thing, some type of archetype of what they think a politician's supposed to be. Like that's Kamala Harris completely, like trying to do like whatever. And that's just not Trump. Like he is just himself. And I think that that's something that, like, in comedy, much like with writing, I mean, there's no exactly like correct way to do it. And there are a million different, successful, amazing comedians who are completely different, like could not be more different than each other. But what they all have in common is that they are authentically something about themselves. And so like that's a big thing right away. And then, like more in like more technically, like in terms of like joke structure and stuff like that, like you can just see people who are like not very good at crafting jokes. I mean, that's one of the things that's very bizarre it changes the higher in levels you get, but when you're at the absolute bottom of stand-up comedy, there's just a lot of delusional people who are there who are just like, you were never funny in your group of friends. Like, I don't know why you think you were supposed to be this thing. And it's wild. You meet a lot of like really really strange characters when you're at the absolute bottom of stand-up. Now, to your point, you're in a different
Wait, can I
situation.
hold on. Let me interject because you brought something up really interesting. My favorite comedian is Neil Hamburger, and I got to meet him here recently when he and I hope I don't think this is telling tales out of school because I think he's talked about it publicly. And a lot of people think he got his persona because of Tony Clifton, who was Andy Kaufman's character. And I asked him about that, and he goes, "No, no, no, no." He goes, "I saw someone doing open mic night, and some guy just bombed terribly. At the end, he's like, ugh, my therapist told me this would be a good idea. It wasn't. Like, good night." And it wasn't a bit. The guy was just completely defeated. And Neil was just like, okay, that's gonna be my life for the next 20 years, being this like really miserable guy. But it's just kind of fascinating how, to your point, it's just like, what, like, that therapist, man, that is that you go to like a spoken word event. You know what I mean? Like, stand-up comedy is both in front of the mic. That audience is hostile often. Like, you're really setting him up to fail.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's not that is I certainly would not give that advice to somebody if I thought there was a reasonable chance that it was going to go in that direction. You know what I mean? Which, like, maybe the therapist was really just did it. It's like, no, everyone will be nice and it'll be fun. And it's like, yeah, I don't know, man. You're getting like drunk people at a nightclub. They're not necessarily going to be like friendly if they just, probably feel like they paid too much for their drinks or whatever, and they're not being entertained by someone. But I mean, I've seen people who were like, it was a very strange thing, man. It's like a weird thing about human psychology and uh, and identity that I knew people who were just really bad, like they were terrible, like pretty regularly bombed, and were never funny, and no one else thought they were funny, but they stayed with it for like over a decade. I knew many
Yeah.
people like
Yeah.
that, and nothing happened. I mean, nothing, you know what I mean? And it was like, I don't know, they're chasing something. They got, they did well on a show sometime, and they're like, yeah, I
I
did
don't
it
have that
once.
kind of stamina, do you?
Oh, no, no. I mean, I never could have. I never, if I didn't figure out how to do good on stage relatively quickly, I wouldn't have made it in stand up. I'm too much I'm too insecure and like hyper self-aware. I don't know. I would like I would, it's not that it wouldn't hurt. It would hurt me, but I would recognize that I was bad at it.
Yeah,
Like
and
I'd be
there's
like,
nothing wrong with
I'm
that.
bad at this. I'm just not good at it. I don't have whatever it is. I don't have it. I can't do that. I'm very quick to recognize that about myself.
There's lots of stand-ups who aren't good comedy writers who have
Mhm.
people, and there's lots of hilarious people who aren't good performers. And some people are bad at both, and doesn't make them bad people.
Yeah, like I can't act for shit. I can't do like a sketch comedy type shit. I just have no talent for that, and that's just, I don't know. I just recognize that. I'm like, oh, that's not me. I'll embarrass myself if I try to do that. I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? And like, but a lot of people do not have that that skill, and
The
it's very. And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, to your authenticity point, I recently saw a comic opening for a friend of mine. I don't wanna say too much, and the material he's doing is just like, "Oh, I was the straight guy at the gay bar," and I'm like, "Okay, this might have been clever in, like, 1996." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then after he got off the stage, I was talking to my friend, and my friend's like, "He just got out of rehab recently, so I'm kinda throwing him a bone." And I'm like, "Talk about that.
Yeah.
How do you not have
Really.
like, talk about that. That's fascinating. Even if the humor is secondary to the story, maybe it's just 'cause I'm an author, but I'm invested. Like, there's no way your rehab journey isn't going to be interesting and unique to you.
And you should be able, like, if it's your goal to find like what are the hilarious things about this, like you should be able to. I'm sure there's gonna
Yes.
be a bunch of things like that. And
Yeah.
again, right to your point, it's like, and again, there's no right or wrong way to do stand-up comedy per se, but it's just kind of like, if you don't have like, if you have a joke, or like, this is true in the world of like political commentary too, in a different way. It's like, if you don't have anything kind of unique to say,
Yeah.
like you don't have anything a little bit different, or a little, like if you were, if you were just going to Imagine you were just like, someone asked you like your thoughts on the election, like something as broad as that, and you were just like, what you had to say was like, I think Donald Trump's a racist, and January 6th was an insurrection, and we're going to have the first female president or something. It's like, well, I don't think you should be a political commentator because you have nothing to add to this. Like, you have you're saying something that I could get from anyone. And
So
same with
many
stand up.
t-shirts.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a thing like that with stand-up comics where like sometimes there'll be like a joke or a story or something, like, you know, like just what you were saying, like straight guy at the gay bar or something, where you're like, I could get this from anyone. Like, do you have anything? Like, do you have anything to add to this? Is there any, you know, and like, so again, I think part of why you're like, when you're like, oh, talk about the rehab thing, because now you're like, yo, that's a thing for you to stand here and say, hey, I just went through this thing. That's a pretty wild thing to go through. Like, that's yours. You kind of own that story, whatever your exact story is. And so there's like, that's a thing that's like, you notice that too as you get to like really great comedians, like, you know, as we went from the bottom, if you go up toward the top where there's like really great comedians, that's something they all have too, is they all have their own thing. Like, they have their own way of putting it, you know, like the way Dave Chappelle would tackle an issue, or the way Bill Burr would tackle an issue is just different than anyone else. And there's something kind of like there's something beautiful about that. You know, there's something like beautiful where it's like, oh, only your mind could have given me that hilarious bit. And yeah, and I think that's something that, again, like if you're doing, you're in a different situation where I think there's something you fundamentally get about that already, you know, like, because you're that way in your field.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, this is what I was thinking. I'm like, okay, I have an audience, I have a voice. I'll give you some of my material in a bit and get your honest feedback, because what I wanted to do, what I realized is the kind of stuff I want to do, I couldn't do from the beginning because I want to do terrorism. I want comedy terrorism. I want the audience to be
That
so,
is you.
yeah, right, and so uncomfortable that they're like, holy shit. And I think I could only do it at the mothership because they lock everyone's phones. Because if I do it in a normie place, 3 or 4 people, once I lose them, they could turn the whole room. And that's a very and if you're filmed, forget it. It's career ending stuff. It's just, to your point of political commentary, I vividly remember when I got my foot in the door, and my advice, and it's great advice for everyone out there as well who want to get in this field. I said to myself, really smart kid, I said, no one cares what you think. So say something interesting or say something uninteresting in an interesting way. That was, I told myself the very first day. And if people followed that advice, right. If you want to say Donald Trump is a racist, an insurrection, Kamala Harris, okay, that's not interesting. You can make it interesting. Say it in an interesting way. Say it in a way that no one's ever heard about this before. It's hard because that Trump mind has been tapped for quite some time. When I hear new attacks on Trump that are creative, like, you got to give, but I haven't for a long time because they're so repetitive and so same shit over. And they're just trying to outcompete with each other how stupid they think he is. It's just like, okay, like, we get it. So it's that's really kind of interesting advice, I think, for a lot of people. Folks, think you know who's going to win the presidential election, how many seats the Democrats or Republicans will win in the House or in the Senate? Well, there's finally a legal way to bet on the outcome of these elections. There's a platform called Kalshi, Kalshi. Kalshi is the first legal exchange where you could trade or bet on any event, including but not limited to elections. They went to court and they won legal approval for election betting for the first time in over 100 years. Take that, Woodrow Wilson. They have markets on who will win the election, who will control the House, who will control the Senate, who will win swing states, and more. Kalshi is already being used by hundreds of thousands of people and has facilitated close to $1 billion worth of trades. Put your money where your mouth and your lawn sign is and give Kalshi a try. Sign up using our link, kalshi.com/malice, kalshi.com/malice. The first 500 traders who deposit $100 will win a free $20 credit. Guys, free money. There's only 500 of you who's going to get it. Go, go, go. That's kalshi.com, kalshi.com/malice to get a $20 credit. Not too shabby. We're proud to have Kalshi as a sponsor, and I hope you check them out. Let's get back to the show. How do you, the other thing I can't handle, this is why I don't really want to get into this other than like as a side gig. How do you handle the travel? Like, it just seems to me like such a and you're a dad.
It's rough. I mean, you know, look, when I say there's a lot harder jobs. So like
Yeah,
I'm not
sure.
trying to say like, you know what I mean? Like I'm very fortunate in the career I have. That is one aspect that is that I don't love the travel. I love doing stand up. And I love like the shows. But being on a plane constantly and being away from my wife and kids is it's not something I enjoy. And I mean, essentially, the way I handle it is just like, well, um, I'm doing what I love. That is, you know, something I've been chasing for a very long time that I'm finally having some success at after many, many years of failing
Sure.
at it. And I'm giving my family a good life by doing it. So that's essentially just the calculation I make in my head. And then it's like, all right, well, I mean, everybody in life has, you know, their burden to bear. And it's like, okay, I just accept that's part of mine, like being at an airport constantly, which I really hate. I hate flying. I hate being at airports. God, I can't stand it. I'm literally the day after tomorrow, I'll be back on another plane. And even as we're talking about this, I'm like, oh God, I'm just not looking forward to that. But, you know, the benefits outweigh the costs.
Yeah, I really I don't like when people, when they hear someone complain about something, assume like, oh boo, you know, it's like, oh boo, you don't have a right to complain. It's like an example I always use is like, let's suppose you have a very successful business and your demand's too high and you're running out of production space and you can't make enough shoes and people are like boo hoo. And it's like, listen, just because it's a successful problem, it's still a problem. It's still part of the problem. So like when people are successful, when people talk about the costs, other people resent you for it, and it's just really, I think, unreasonable and unfair. I'm
I,
not saying. Go
I
ahead.
agree, but I also think if you do have good problems to have, it's not a bad thing to like recognize at certain points that like, okay, these are good problems to have. That doesn't
I
mean that
I
they're not still legitimate problems,
I
but you know,
don't think being away from your family half the week every week is a minor deal. Like
well,
complaining about travel is yeah, airplanes, who cares? But that's the part, the emotional part, I think would be the
yeah,
hard
no,
part.
that's the toughest part. But I'm not away from them every week. I mean, I make
Okay.
sure to like limit my travel to I typically do 2 weekends out of the month.
Okay. Okay. That's much
Now
better.
that's so I do so it's every other weekend, or sometimes it'll be back to back, but then I'll try to take back to back
Okay.
weeks off. So I try, you know, like I try to find the balance. It's not the easiest thing in the world. You know, it's not exactly like written in stone what the balance is. I particularly feel like because the country has been pretty unstable over the
Mhm.
last few years, and I'm quite concerned about that.
Yeah.
I'm not like I'm a long-term optimist
Sure.
by choice. But you know, like me and you, we both believe in the white pill.
Yeah.
But I'm very concerned about, you know, like where the country could go in the next
Oh,
few
yeah.
years. And so I feel like there's kind of this like I got to make as much money as I can make because that kind
Yeah.
of gives like the best security for my family. Um, and so, but also at the same time, I don't want to not, you know, like I don't want to not be present,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
especially right now, I have little kids, and
Yeah.
you know,
Exactly. It's a
it's a
blessing.
very short lived kind of magical period, and so you know, I want to be there as much as I can. So it's just, you know, it's kind of like anything else. I guess the part that I'm fortunate about is that like I do well enough on the road and from the podcasts that I can do that. I don't have to be like on the road every single weekend, and so that's good. But yeah, it's balance, and it is something that you know, I get what like when my daughter was very young, when I first had my daughter, like I just stopped doing the road altogether because I just didn't want to. I just wanted to be home with my wife and the new baby, and I do miss those days. Like I kind of miss. I wish I could be home all the time. I wish I was just doing like back then. I was doing two Part of the Problems a week and one Legion of Skanks a week, and not traveling that much, and it was
Yeah.
great. I just had so much time with my girls. And you know, I have two kids now, and life has gotten a lot more expensive. And now it's you know, like when she was a baby, I didn't really need to give her that much that was that expensive. Now it's kind of like, oh, kids cost a lot as they get older. And
Yeah.
so it's just I gotta make money. So it is
When you're
it's a difficult balance.
When you're in these cities, are you actually having an opportunity to actually explore them at any length? Like, what are you doing? And like,
I I have that opportunity. I don't
okay.
I don't take advantage of it ever. But like, yes, technically the opportunity, like outside of my hotel, there is a whole city and the doors are not locked. Like I do have the opportunity to go out and do anything I want to, really. But I do none of that. I honestly, dude, that's my reading time. Like
Oh, okay.
that's when I actually can read, because it's just between, I mean read books, not just like
Yeah, yeah.
read the news, because like between doing the show, um I always have to be like up on the news, because it's always,
Of
the
course.
show's a current event show, and so I'm always have to be like reading the news every day. And then I got two little kids, and I got, you know what I mean, and I have, if I'm done with all the work, it's a good thing to like, spend 5 minutes with your wife every now and then if you got the kids to sleep and you're done with work for the day. So like in terms of like, and like I'm like, you're the same way, like everybody who reads books essentially is the same way, right? Like we all just have a lot of books that we're supposed to read that we haven't read yet. You know what I mean? You have a lot of like things like, oh, I want to read this and I want to read this, but I have to read this first or whatever. And so that's kind of my time. Like that's my time when I get to a hotel on Thursday and I got shows Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. I have all day uninterrupted by myself just in a hotel room. And that's where I get my reading done. But I don't really I don't do too much, man. I mean, I remember we were in me and Rob Bernstein were in Cleveland last year, and he was like, "Yo, let's go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame." And I was like, "Okay, all right, I'll do that." And then we just didn't. I just
Really?
started. I don't know. I
It's
just
just
didn't.
fascinating to me because I would think the best I'm a homebody, like total homebody.
Me too.
I would think the best part, or not the best part, excuse me, but one of the best side aspects of having to travel is, all right, when I travel, I just did this episode of traveling with on BAP's podcast, Bronze Age Pervert. When I travel, I always like to have for each day, I've got one thing I got to do. Right. So if I, just this past summer, I went, I had a few days and I'm like, you know what? I don't want to spend my birthday bouncing off the walls here in Austin. I went with my friend Jackie to Chicago for a weekend.
I know.
I'm like,
I
all right,
came to Austin, and you left. You
there's only room
get,
for one of us.
you went, dude, it's my fucking birthday, dude. I mean, this is ridiculous. I don't have to deal with Dave on my birthday. That's not right.
Yeah, why should I be punished on my birthday? So it was a great time. But like I had like, okay, today we got to do this thing, tomorrow we're doing this thing, so on and so forth. So I'm surprised that this is especially someone who's as intellectually curious as you, this seems like such a missed opportunity.
um, yeah, it is to some degree. It is. I don't know. I just like I can't really ever get myself to motivate to do that. And I don't know. I've just always kind of like, I never did it even before like I had kids and stuff. I used to, I mean, back then, like back in the day where I used to like open for Jay all the time. So we'd be traveling together, but the two of us, it would always just be like, it was, I don't know. I was always like, I'm a weirdly like laser focused person. And I think this has something to do with having ADD or ADHD or something like that. But like, cause it's weirdly like, ADHD really isn't, it's not really like a deficit of attention. It's like weird attention issues. And then sometimes you can just laser focus on
Yeah.
one thing and kind of blur everything else out. But I've always been like that. And I literally, I mean, like that's how I became the libertarian guy that I am today. It's like I just like found these ideas
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
was like, that's it. I need to read everything that's ever been written about this, and like that's I get weirdly obsessive like that. And it was always like with stand-up comedy, man, it was always like it was a thing. This is one of the things that I thought was so romantic about it, that I fell in love with comedy, was it was like it was a life. Like it wasn't just like when you're on stage you're making these jokes. It was like, no, you have to live this life. This is it. You immerse yourself in that. My friends are stand-up comics. What do I do for fun? I go to do stand-up comedy for fun. Like what would I do if I didn't have a spot tonight? I'd go hang with my friends at the comedy club, and you know what I mean? Like it was just that was it. And whenever like me and Jay were on the road, it was always about like the hang, being funny, just like making each other laugh all day, and then going to do the shows that night. And that was it. It was never like, oh, let's go be tourists for a minute. Like that was just like it was almost like a thing like that's just outside of the purview of what this
Yeah.
thing that we're doing is. And I know that's not lots of comics do that. Lots of comics do take advantage of like traveling and stuff, but I really haven't. I went like sometimes there's exceptions. Like I went out a little bit when we went to Europe last year. I was like, okay, I'm like in foreign countries now. I guess I should go walk around during the day. So I did that. But now in general, I really do nothing except my
Are you
shows.
are you eating like room service? Like, do you not even go out to get some good
Oh, I'll
food?
go out. No, I'll go out. I'll take Rob out to lunch or something like that.
Okay.
That's about, yeah. We'll look for a good spot to go get something to eat. I do get room service sometimes, but no, I will do
Wow.
that. I'll do that. I'll go get a go to a restaurant. Room service is rarely good.
Yeah, it's also just I would think you'd get this is so fascinating. This is not at all what I expect you to say. I just feel like I'd have cabin fever. Like when I was in Japan in April, right? The hotel rooms in Japan, it's either like $500 for like it's literally just a bed and a desk, or it's like 2,000 for like a normal size hotel room. It's like why am I
Really?
dropping quadrupled? Yeah, like it's like why am I dropping? Or
Wow.
some, maybe I'm exaggerating, but not by much. Like why am I dropping quadruple the money when I want to be in my hotel room as little as possible? I'm in Japan. So it just it's and I feel like if I'm traveling, if I'm in my hotel room, I'm doing something wrong. So it's just interesting to me that you'd be like, all right. I just I can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah. No.
Again, all I would do is I just have to have that one thing. I'm gonna go to that weird T-shirt store, this cool bookstore, see this statue, something, anything.
No. I'm like, I got to reread The Israel Lobby by John Mearsheimer. I remember there was a bunch of good stuff in there and I've forgotten it all. I got to reread that book.
It's so highlighted. It's just all yellow. The highlighter's leaking through the back cover.
That's
What
the truth.
I want to hear some more of your experience. What do you do? Or is it just kind of white knuckle it when something doesn't land and you feel them starting to turn? You must have lost many crowds, especially back in the beginning.
Oh, I mean, I've done so many, I mean, I've been doing stand-up comedy for 18 years.
Yeah,
And like maybe the last 4 or 5 years, I've like I sell some tickets. So like
right.
I can kind of pick my spots a little bit more. But the whole time before that, so whatever, 13 years, was just going out and doing as many spots as you could at whatever club or room or whatever would have you. So I mean, just like, yeah, like everybody who was in every comic who was like in the trenches like that has a million, bomb stories and one of the things like you kind of like I think pretty quickly in stand up like I figured out how to like be good for my amount of time in.
Mhm.
Like I figured out how to get laughs pretty quickly and I would pretty regularly do well on stage. And I
Okay.
remember one of the things that I realized like in my first year of stand-up comedy was that like to the naked eye, to someone who doesn't really know much about stand-up, um, a, a guy who's been doing comedy for 6 months, if there's a hot crowd and things are going good, could seem good. Like to a random person off the street, could seem like, oh, he's got some funny stuff and like he was doing well and blah blah. It's when something goes bad that you really figure out who's a pro and who's not. And a big it takes a while to get comfortable just in that moment. So the moment you're talking about when you really are, it's like it's hard to describe. It's an incredibly vulnerable thing. It's like you're getting up in front of a big group of people and going, "Everybody, I think this is really funny. Don't you too?" And they all go, "No." And
It's
like
a consensus.
we checked in real time. We checked with
Yeah.
everybody. It's the most
Right.
efficient polling mechanism. Like you have no,
Yes.
like it's just unanimous. Um, and it's not even about what you say or what you do. It's just about being truly comfortable in that. It's just about being like, just being able to just be like, you're like, hey, I think this is really funny. And everyone's like, we don't. And you're like, all right. That's,
Moving
you
on.
know, like,
Okay.
yeah, what it's, you don't even necessarily have to address it, but you could address it or you could do whatever. But there's a weird, and you notice this, like, this is, if you see a new comic, that's where you'll see all the green on them. You'll see in the moment when something was supposed to happen and it didn't happen that way. You know, I see this a lot. There's like a real sign of like a green comic is like they'll write their like bit around what the reaction is supposed to be to some degree. You know, whatever, there's a line in there where, you know, they say something shocking and they go, now I know what you guys think, or blah, 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 or now you guys react. And you'll see moments where they don't get that reaction and they still proceed as if they did.
Oh.
Like they still stick to the script and are like, "Wow, you guys got like," but you're like, "No, they didn't get like that at all. That didn't happen this time." You're expecting that reaction, but you didn't get it, and you're not comfortable enough on the fly to be like, "Well, I'm not going to just pretend that something happened that didn't happen." Does that make sense? Like
Of course.
if you look for that, you'll see a lot of that with new comics.
Folks, traditional bed sheets can harbor more bacteria than a toilet seat, which can lead to acne, to allergies, to stuffy noses, and it is gross. Miracle Made offers a full line of self-cleaning, eco-friendly bedding such as sheets, pillowcases, and comforters that prevent 99% of bacteria and require 3 times less laundry. They're infused with silver, and that prevents up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, which leaves them staying cleaner and fresher 3 times longer. No more gross odors. And by using these silver-infused fabrics, which were inspired by NASA, the Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, so you get better sleep every night. They're very comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Miracle Made sheets are designed for your skin. Bacteria can clog your pores. It causes breakouts and acne. Sleep clean with Miracle. Here's all you got to do. Go to trymiracle.com/malice to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo Malice at checkout, you get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you aren't 100% satisfied, full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/malice. Use code malice to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/malice to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. Let's get back to the show. What other cues or indication, like what do you do if the audience starts to turn? Because there's 2 kind of strategies that I'm familiar with. One is, all right, I had them, I can win them back, right? And like, or just don't dwell on this. And you know, we've had this sometimes. I've had this, I'm sure you've had this in podcasts, like when the conversation's not going that well, instead of doubling, you know, you could try to steer back and like, okay, let's take a few steps back to when we're on the same page. But then also there's the times when you just start doubling down and it gets more adversarial. And I feel like I see that a lot when stand-ups are bombing, and I don't think that ever really works. Like when you start getting hostile, it really, it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of that is also just like personality styles. Like
Sure.
different people have different things. I remember Nate Bargatze, who like he's a very good friend of mine, and we started, you know, like he started a few years before me, but we were like very, very tight friends. We still are to this day, but we used to, you know, be at the clubs every single night together. And he used to do this thing where he would kind of like dig himself a hole and then almost like just attempt to get out of it just on the strength of his joke writing. Like literally relying on nothing else, but almost just like, I'm going to slow everything down. He'd kind of like tank the first 30 seconds of his set and then just slowly start telling you these jokes and just be like, you know, these jokes are going to be so good that they'll get me, you know, like, and it would consistently work. I mean, he's such a good joke writer. And then I know there, you know, there are comedians who like, will just lean into bombing. I know a lot of those guys who I think are really funny, who are just, you know, like Adrienne Appalucci was always one of those comics. Like she was hilarious. Like, and still, she is like one of the best joke writers. Just so goddamn funny and really beautifully dark and hilarious. But like, at least the way she used to be back in the day when we were in the clubs together, was like, dude, if an audience didn't like her, she was just like, fuck you. I don't like you much either. And I am really not interested in like changing your mind about me. It's like, oh, it seems like you don't like, you don't like the fucking shocking, edgy thing. It's like, okay, well, buckle up because I'm about to like, you know what I mean? Just do the fucking, like she just doubled down on whatever. And it was
Okay,
hilarious. As a comedian, it was hilarious to watch.
This is what I have to do. Okay, you basically, I'm like, all right, that's the way, that's the one, that's the one.
Well,
Okay,
I've never been that style
right. Okay,
of comic. Like that was never my thing. And I was always trying to kill. Like I was always trying to win the fucking room back. And if there was something where I was like, I don't think this crowd's gonna like this fucking bit, I'd be like, let me do something that I think they're gonna fucking love. I just never like had that style. But there are amazing comedians who I love. Dude, Patrice O'Neill, I've watched him like walk rooms.
really,
Like literally just like he fucking decided he hated the fucking crowd and like fucking I get real, like really get pissed off at audience members. Like he was fucking furious at them. Fucking like and when he knew he was getting to him, he doubled down until they fucking stormed out. I mean, it was I watched it happen and it was so funny. Like for the fucking comics in the back, we were like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. But that audience, like they left hating that guy that night. It was beautiful to watch. But that was never me.
wow.
That was never my style.
Do you consider yourself more of an extrovert than me? Like, do you, or is this something that's just grueling and takes a lot out of you?
No, I'm very naturally like I like performing for
Okay.
people. I like meeting people. I like all of that. So no, I that part always came naturally to me.
Okay, yeah, that's the part. Okay, this is really really useful and very interesting. Something Kurt told me, which I thought was fascinating. He goes
P
that
Diddy works
I'm
for the aliens.
he
He does. According to
what,
Kurt, he does.
what's really funny, I'm at the point of my friendship with Kurt Metzger that when he texts me, I hear it in his voice, and I literally see him vaping with his crazy eyes just sitting next to me, and like how he talks.
Oh, you don't think they would do that? You don't think they would do that, Michael?
That's the one. I said that to him. I go, I read your text now in your voice. He goes, yeah, well, I wrote it in my voice. He said, I'm going to have a bit of an issue because if I'm in some ways cutting the line, a lot of these other comics are going to get pissed that I didn't like pay my dues.
Like I definitely, and me and you have talked about this before, right? Like in the libertarian world, I know I get a lot of that within, like people have that feeling about me in certain quarters. Like
Really?
there's no question that like I've had like a lot of different people who were like just the guys who have been at Cato forever or been at Reason forever, who's always kind of had this thing. It was like, oh, where'd this guy come from? And he's just some podcaster and we're supposed to think his opinion matters type deal. The way I look at it is like,
Wait, can we stop? Hold on. No. I'm not moving on. We're going to
okay,
stop
good.
right here. What you just said is causing the reaction in me that if I choose to do this, hope to cause my audience, which is almost literal physical pain.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
hold on. Hold on. The idea that some Reason or Cato suit isn't on these shows, but for Dave fucking Smith is so I don't have words. It's so there's such a lack of, and here's the other thing, just for people in the audience in general, if you're jealous of somebody and think they've got something that they don't deserve and you do, figure out what they're doing right and you're doing wrong. It's something, I promise.
Yeah,
But
100%.
Everyone at Cato, especially that Ilya guy, I think it's the one I talk about. You are never, ever, 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 ever in any timeline, even the one where they beat Thanos, going to be the person that they call to be on these panels, because maybe you know statistics inside and out, but this isn't Siri. If they wanted that, they could talk to Alexa. They want someone who's personable and engaging, and when they have a conversation with somebody else, are present and aren't just waiting to fall back on their autistic talking points. You utterly
Yes.
repulsive creatures. There's a
Yes.
reason you're a think tank and you don't have an audience.
Well, it's a very it's like
Oh,
a very
God.
leftist impulse
Oh,
to
sure.
kind of have this like, well, I put in my dues. You know, like it's and I kind of, you know, in the same way that like it's almost like sometimes when the leftists complain about like what's fair, it's not that they
Right.
don't have a point. Like, yeah, I guess there are things that are unfair, but it's like, yeah, that's life. Life is unfair. I
I
mean, I
had a
don't know.
college
Like
I had
it's
I had a
there's
college professor, and he had a whiteboard, and he goes, "Okay, fair, unfair. Everyone, what name something that's fair, write down, unfair, write down." And then when everyone's done, he wrote at the top, "I like it," and then "I don't like it." Like these words don't have meaning.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's right. I mean, like, and you could, I don't know. It's not like before, you know, I used to love basketball. That was my whole life when I was a kid. That's what I was laser focused on then. I literally played basketball every single day. If we didn't have practice, I played street ball. Like that's all I did was play basketball. And like LeBron James got to be 6'9" and 280 and can fucking, you know, jump out of the building. And I didn't. And like, that's not fair, you know,
Right.
but like, what? I don't know. Okay. No, that's right. It just is. I don't know what to say. Like, it's just, and I got this in the Libertarian Party too. There'd be all these people, especially the older guys. They'd be like, you know, I've been a card carrying member for 27 years, and Dave just shows up and now he gets to dictate what's going on here. And you'd be like, I know, right? It's crazy.
Holy shit.
Like you
I
know, and so anyway, this is a long way to just get to the point that like it's it's been very, very interesting for me. I've been in my dual mandate of a career, where I'm like a stand-up comedian and then I do like political commentary. Like both of those worlds, and for the exact same reason, have been revolutionized since I've been in them. Like they're totally, just totally, there's no other word that could describe it. It is totally everything that was the thing to do in stand-up comedy when I started is all gone now. None of it exists. Just for Laughs, I think shut down. It's not even a festival anymore. This was the thing. The whole like idea of like getting Conan or getting Letterman or Leno or like any of this shit is just like that's not even the thing anymore. This Shane Gillis and Tim Dillon have never done a late night set, either of them. It's just that would have been unheard of anyone. Like
yeah,
that was
yeah,
the way
yeah.
you got big, like just not that long ago. You know, when I started, I was almost 20 years, so it's a while, but like the whole thing's just, and the same with, you know, like the landscape of media. I mean, all the speculation right now about both the candidates going on Rogan, it's amazing. It's just amazing. It's like it's a whole different world. And so anyway, the way I look at that is like, I mean, like if other comics have a fucking problem with that, that's just kind of their problem. And like it's a new world now. And yeah, it's you don't you okay. I remember when I was I can't remember, it was like over 10 years ago for sure. But for a little while, John Mayer started comedy and he was
The
doing stand-up.
musician?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
He started just going to the Comedy Cellar and doing sets like he wanted to pursue comedy, and then he stopped doing it. But so he went and he was like John fucking Mayer, you know, he was dating Jennifer Aniston at the time and selling out arenas. And then he'd come by the Comedy Cellar. And I remember open micers bitching about that and being like, dude, this is bullshit. Like he didn't put his dues in. He's just at the Comedy Cellar already. And you're like, yeah, it's John fucking Mayer, dude. Where do you think he's going to play? The open mic with you? He can
Right,
play
right.
any room he wants to fucking play. I like, okay, you're not like selling out stadiums, but it's the same principle. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. Yeah, you're a guy who's you're also you're known in part for being funny. Like you are in the business of being funny for your audience, and you have an audience. So yeah,
Right.
you're gonna skip some levels that other people didn't, but that's I don't know. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, okay, okay. Do you wanna hear some of my material?
Not really. I'd rather just keep, you know, I'd rather just keep respecting you.
That's the most Michael Malice answer ever.
I don't think you should run your material by me on the podcast. No. That is my honest opinion.
I'm so happy right now. Okay, fair enough. Folks, have you heard that the flavored air category is quickly becoming a leading alternative to vaping and smoking? It's a whole new movement toward better habits, which is led by the sponsor of today's episode, Fume. Flavored air isn't like vaping. If vapor was compared to sticky soda, Fume cores are closer to herbal tea. Fume has lots of delicious flavors to choose from, like crisp mint and orange vanilla. And with flavored air, you can satisfy your oral fixation through a passive diffusion system that utilizes no electronics, vapor, or combustion. Fume draws flavor to your mouth and fills the void that ditching a bad habit can leave. You still have something to reach for. No vapor, no nicotine, no batteries, and it looks awesome. And it's made to fidget with, so you can calm anxiety with magnets, snaps, and clicks. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. For a limited time, use code MALICE to get a free gift with your journey pack. Head to tryfume.com, that's tryfum.com, and use code MALICE, or you can scan that QR code right on the screen to get a free gift with your order today. Let's get back to the show. Your thing about basketball was I got a clip today from because this is lead up to question I have for you. I got a text today from David Lucas, and he had a little clip about the presidential race, and he was talking about who are hiring these Trump assassins. He's like, it's the WNBA. It's just like no one knows how to take a good shot. Just a lot of footwork, and he just moved on. I go, dude, like there's a lot here. Just talk about this more. And then I go, I can't believe we're at a day and age where I have to tell a black man to talk more about basketball. Like, what have we come to as a society? But what this is leading up to is, how do you know beforehand if something's going to be funny or not? Is it only after the fact? Because that seems like a real mind fuck.
It's you could sometimes you have like a really good feeling. Like you're like, yo, this is great. I found the new thing. This is gonna kill. But even sometimes you'll be kind of certain and it just doesn't come together. Right. And then there's a weird there's a weird thing with the like the pros of stand-up comedy. Like there's just, like you could take a really funny thought to stage, but you kind of have to find the right way to say it to like draw laughter out of the crowd. And sometimes you have a really funny thing, but you just struggle for a while to like put it together. And like I've had countless times where just like I'll just figure it out one day. Like literally I had this idea, I'm playing with it, and then one day on stage I just say it the right way and you went, that was it. That's the way to say it. It just kind of comes to you. I've had, like, I think all stand-ups will tell you this, but I've had things that I was like loved the idea and eventually just gave up on. Like, I just can't get this to work. And then I've had things that I was really shaky on. I was like, I kind of like this, but I don't know if this is going to do very good. That ended up just being like, oh, it does great. So there's always like some degree, but I do think the more time that you're in it, the more you develop an instinct for just being like, you tend to know when you have it. You tend to be like, oh, okay, this is a real good one. This is going to be a killer bit.
Your set's like at least an hour. I've seen you perform here at Mothership. How do you have issues remembering it all? That's a lot of stuff. Like, what's your technique?
Well, it was always, I'd always kind of like, I kind of write chunks that flow into each other, like I've always kind of done that. So it's that helps a lot too. But it's kind of like, I don't know, man, like, when you were a kid and you just memorized phone numbers,
No, I'm not on the spectrum. I just joked that I am. Wait, are you serious?
Oh yeah, when I was a kid, everyone knew everyone's phone number. We all just had them memorized.
I guess I didn't know any other kids with. I mean, I wasn't really calling anyone because I didn't really have any friends as a kid because I went to like yeshiva and I wasn't allowed to have kids over.
Right, right. Okay, that'll do it. But so that was just, and you knew every word of every song that was on the radio,
That's
and
yeah,
you
that
just
is
like
true.
just knew like it's like you have the capacity to remember a lot of shit when you're really motivated to do it. And so like in a weird way, it's like, no, like I remember all my jokes. I wrote them, you know? It's like forget you memorized somebody else's song. Like the I wrote this song. You know what I mean? So like it's just it weirdly. Now, that being said, there have for sure been times like I've had other comics come up to me and be like, oh, I love when you used to do this tag on that joke. But like I always loved that. How come you don't do that anymore? And I've been like, oh yeah, that's right. I completely forgot that I used to do that tag. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that. So like there is stuff that gets lost or forgotten. Um, but I'm pretty, like I have I'm a very like there's a lot of comics who are very like stick to the script, and I'm not really like that. I kind of like I know the idea of my joke and I say it differently in different shows, and I kind of just I like to just be in the moment. And so like even like when I'll do an hour typically when I'm headlining on the road. And I always have like more stuff that I could do after that. So it's just, I got the light. I'm at 55 minutes. I better go into my closing thing. And that's like, so it's not like some shows I will just like leave one joke out because I felt like telling another one or, something like that. So I don't really stress like, did I remember each thing? I always remember like the big things that I want to do in the set,
Do
if that
you
makes
ever
sense.
like have a brain fart on stage and you're like, holy shit, where am I?
I've had a few, but very, very rarely that they've been like literally like over the 18 years I've been doing stand-up comedy, like maybe 5 times where I've literally like I started a thing and forgot where I was
Yeah,
in it. I've had a few. I mean, not like really anymore, but I've had a few in my day where I was like a little too fucked up, like
sure, sure.
where it was kind of like like that, like this is a little unprofessional. I had like too much to drink. On like the third show of a night, you're like, dude, I went a little bit too hard early, and that's where I've like, but very very rarely like things like that.
How would you, for people who aren't in the industry, how would you describe what a group of stand-ups, and it's going to vary enormously on the people, of course, but what's it like in those green rooms? Like, what is the typical stand-up group of comics waiting to go on stage? That energy's like, because I think we only know it from like movies, and people don't really know what it's like in real life.
Well, the thing is, it's like I feel like they know more now than ever before because of podcasts.
Yeah,
So
sure,
it's
that's
like
fair.
it's really, when I first started stand up, that shit, it was just like it was like we just did that, but not for anyone. You know what I mean? Like it was just like the same way like if there's a show, if it was like me and Jay and Lewis and Soder and Ari or something like that, and like some topic comes up and then everyone goes around and like tags it up, and then someone chimes in here and someone chimes in there, like that was that was every night. You know what I mean? Like that was just like, oh, you'd walk into wherever, Stand Up New York or the Comedy Cellar or the Stand or something, and that was just every night. But it was just never for anyone. So it was always when I came up in New York, it was pretty ruthless and vicious. There's
Mm.
a lot of ball busting and like trashing people, and but it was just I remember, dude, like being in some of those green rooms or being in cars going on road gigs and stuff, and just being like, and this is before any of us did podcasts, but I remember just being like, yo, this is like the funniest shit ever happening right here, and like no one will ever see this, but this is just like this is so much funnier than anyone's stand up is just watching like all these comics, trash this fucking whoever, because they wore a stupid shirt or something, and it was just there's just a lot of that, but it was always everything was always centered around being hilarious. That was always the thing.
I feel like there's a lot of young people who don't have their shit together, and that's both the basis of their set, and it's also like them in real life. And is that as common in those green rooms as I'm perceiving?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly was the truth for me for most of my time in stand up. I mean, it's like, I think we're already like there's incredible, I think, immaturity to our society in general, which is like really, I do think, it's one of the things that would make American culture particularly unique in history. And this is probably true for first world countries in general, although I don't know as much about other. I know this is particularly true in America, that we're an incredibly immature society. We grow up very, very late, and people are, like in not that long ago in history, people as teenagers were becoming, taking on adult responsibilities. And people tend to grow up like in their 40s, today. And then I think stand-up comedy is a particularly immature job. Like it's ridiculous, like to make sillies for a living is not like, that's not what grown-ups are supposed to do in some weird artificial sense, so yeah, I do think there's a lot of arrested development amongst comedians, and there were a lot of people who lived very kind of decadent, like maybe decadent isn't even exactly the right word,
marginal.
But just, yes, yeah, like the people on the fringes of society to some degree, certainly when we were younger. But then it's been kind of interesting to I've grown up in this world, like literally. I was a child when I started in my early 20s, and and now I'm a dad in his 40s. And so it is a little bit weird to be like, yeah, the same thing where we'd all be doing jokes about just being degenerates and being broke and all of this. And now it's kind of like that thing is like, oh, well, I'm paying my mortgage off of that now. So it does feels a little bit different now.
Folks, head over to malice.locals.com, where Dave took questions from supporting listeners. Dave, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
I did really enjoy when I shot you down from running material by me on the show. That, I don't know, that was just a fun moment. But I will listen to your jokes, just not on air.
Are welcome.
Hi, we're the Nemeth Bros. I'm Nick, and he's Ryan, and I'm a 20-plus year pro wrestling veteran, amateur comedian, F-list actor, wannabe lawyer, and once ate a 96-ounce steak, and we have a new podcast because we finally got some time on our plate called The Nemeth Bros. The Nemeth Bros.
Hey, Nick, what is this podcast about?
This podcast is going to be about stories from the road for the past 20-plus years of my pro wrestling career, winning world championships, injuries, everything in between that you can think of. Stories about you and I putting together a comedy tour, you and I doing skits, me being an F-list actor, on-set stuff, and of course, Q&A, answered questions in depth from the fans who want to hear them the most.
Hey, what if I want to have special guests on that are like famous comedians or showbiz types?
There's no rules. This is America. Bring them in.
Hey, if we're bragging about accomplishments, I have been an extra on Jimmy Kimmel Live 27 times. Follow, rate, and review the Nemeth Bros podcast at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
The Nemeth Bros.
I love reality TV on Pluto TV.
Same, and I love that it's free.
It gives me the freedom to watch Bravo's Real Housewives Vault channel.
I'm totally free to watch Bad Girls Club.
I'm free for Jersey Shore.
Love and Hip Hop, I'm free all day.
Survivor, I'm free all night.
With hundreds of free reality shows, you are totally free to watch what you love on Pluto TV.
Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.